What's going on, everyone? This is the time where we look at photographs a little bit differently. We are used to going through Instagram and Facebook and just endlessly scrolling through photographs, and it's not often that we take the time to really sit down and ask ourselves why we like this or why we don't. We just kind of have an initial reaction and we click like. Maybe we throw some emojis on there, like thumbs up and stuff like that, and we move on. And this section of the course is designed to help us slow down. So when I'm in my classroom, my students go through this process. We talk about photographs, and then we do this process to each other's photographs multiple times, hopefully weekly. And it's one of the best ways that people can get better as photographers, and then looking and being a participant in the community, looking at other photography. So I have a photo that is a famous photo by Dorothea Lange, and this one's called Migrant Mother. If you want to look it up, it's an older photo. It was made. She was under a contract with the government, so it's a copyright-free photo, and it is also just a fantastic example of really artistic documentary photography. So we go through a process, and the first step that we do is describe. Describe is meant to slow us down and just kind of stop us from just giving an initial reaction like, oh, that's really cool. I like that expression that she has. And I think that, it's a good photograph or not. And then you move on. So this step is asking us to go slower. So for instance, you just start naming the details, even the ones that you think maybe aren't important. I've almost never gone through this process without people noticing things that they didn't notice before. So when you look at this photograph, there are obviously a woman. There's obviously a woman in the middle. She's looking off past the photographer's shoulder. She has her hands on her hand on her chin. She's surrounded by children. She has little kids next to her. They're facing away. Their hands are dirty. Their clothing is ripped and torn. The mother's shirt looks ripped and torn and worn and rough. I think when you look through all the textures in this photograph, they're all pretty rough. The little kids, their haircuts are just kind of like, it looks like those cuts just right behind them, or right behind the ear. And then she's holding a baby. That baby's face is very dirty. And this is one of those ones where a lot of people don't see, or some students don't see the baby over here. And once again, it's really, really dirty. The face is dirty. Generally not something that you see when you look at pictures of babies. There's some kind of object right here in the front, and it looks like maybe the background is a tent. The background fades away into darkness / it gets blurrier, and that makes us look at her. You can see the worn creases in her face, and her eyes. You're directed towards her eyes. They pull you in, and they also. She looks like she's worried, or she's contemplating, or she's thinking. So that would be a quick way to do the description part. And you could talk about her inside shirt there if you want to, the checkered shirt. And there's probably a few more things that you could look at, but that's pretty much most of it. And you're slowing down, you're noticing things. And the next step that we go through is to analyze what the photographer brought to the table. So it's not just the physical things that are in the photograph that you see. The photographer also brings a lot to the table. And when you're first starting out, this one's a little harder because you don't know, as a photographer, all the terminology and everything like that. As you go through this course, you'll learn that stuff. So it's really important that you come back to this and you look at this with new eyes. And when you're looking at other works of photography, you're remembering to bring in some of these elements. So a few of the elements that we're looking at here for this picture would be the use of like a framing. The woman is framed by her 3 children. So a frame is a frame within a frame, and it pushes you in. The hair of the 2 kids is pretty dark, and her hair is dark, which also brings you into the inside. The contrast between the background and the foreground's brighter, so that pushes you on the inside. You could see a direct triangle between the 3 children, and they kind of intersect where the mom is, which is interesting. The lines in her arm lead right up into her face. The depth of field, which is the amount of focus, the background's blurry. She's in focus. The children are in focus. This front part, this foreground, I think it's like a tent pole, is blurry. By the way, I almost forgot this, but if you look really closely right here, there's a thumb there that in editing they try to clone that out. So even long time ago, even back, it wasn't called cloning. It was they just used darkroom tricks. Even a long time ago, they were doing Photoshop type stuff. And so that's the analyzing part, is you're looking at the things that the photographer, like composition and depth of field and maybe shutter speed and those kind of deals. And then texture is really important here too. They use enough detail and focus to get you to be able to see the texture in their clothing and their skin. So that's the first step, is description. Second step is analyzing, just looking at the stuff the photographer brought to the table. And the third step is interpret, and that's interpreting what you think the photographer was trying to do here. And Dorothea Lange, was working for the government trying to show the troubles that people in different farms and different locations around the United States were going through. And there's a whole history about it. You can read about it. It's really, really cool. It's really interesting. And this photograph was made to document that. So right off the bat, we already know some information and we know the purpose there. And most of the time, you'll not know that. You'll just look at a photograph and try to figure out the intent. And sometimes my students get real deep, and I don't think you need to. You just need to be able to say sometimes, hey, this is a picture of a flower, and I think the photographer was trying to show us how beautiful the picture was, the flower is, the world is. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be a little bit more complicated like this, where the photographer perhaps is trying to show the troubles that this woman and this family are going through, and the look of consternation on her face, the worn clothing. They obviously don't have a lot of money. What kind of issues or problems is going through this family's life? And also, it's asking us, what can we do? Is there anything that we could do to help? And that was the point of the photographs. And then when you get to the last part, I used to call it judgment. That was the old art critic terminology, right? You're going to judge the photograph whether it's good or not. We don't use that term. We usually just reserve this spot for comments and for us to be able to talk about the photograph with a little bit more knowledge. So you could separate your personal feelings. Like, you could look at this photograph and say, I don't really like black and white photographs. It's not my thing. I don't like pictures of people, and move on. But if you were slowing down and you're looking at the photograph and then interpreting it, you can at least then make a judgment, a comment, a informed criticism or advice maybe, based on whether the photograph was successful. And I think it's hard to say this photograph is not successful. It stood the test of time. It's a classic one. It's unique. It's different. It really has a story behind it, and it works really well. It's really, really strong. You know, it's not perfect, and that's what's so interesting about a lot of these old photographs. If you zoom in, you can see, like, the woman's eyes are not in focus. It looks like the girls or the children's heads behind her are more in focus than her eyes. So, like, if you're gonna get real, like, I gotta find something to criticize, that could be one little thing. Although, I don't know, I think you're being too critical if you do something like that, because not everyone's going to get everything in focus and all that stuff. And maybe she wanted the children to be in focus a little bit more. So that's just a quick rundown of how we could look at photographs in a new way using a classic photo. This photo works really well to show that example. And we're going to be doing more of this in the future.